All right, now you're live streamed.
Excellent.
And
Thanks
I will
for
be
opening
back.
up the live stream, Chris. Come back in person as soon as you can.
I'll be glad to. Good luck, everybody.
All right. So folks, we're going to mute the room for just a few minutes while people grab lunch. And then when we get our presenters here, we'll get started.
Kick us off, Sarah.
All right, welcome to the video log for the week. Chris and I are still working in separate locations. Chris and the rest of the Senate is all still Zooming from home, and House members are mostly here in the building. So you may recognize that I have taken over the Senate Transportation Committee for this noon hour while we're recording this. And I'm really excited to bring this interview to you today because many of us, you can't really throw a stick in Vermont without seeing a car that has the bumper sticker that says "Think Global."
Thank you. I do like that though. Think globally, act locally.
Bob, thanks for being with us today. We really appreciate you entertaining us while we're waiting for folks to filter in. So we are live right now, and we did that because Senator Pearson had to go back to the Senate floor. So he opened us up and threw us live, and Bob was entertaining us with some of our previous weekly video logs. The focus of the meeting here today is really to sort of assemble and celebrate our wins so far this year. We're hitting the midway point of this legislative session. We want to make sure that we have a good sense of our accomplishments as a Climate Solutions Caucus on the priorities that we brought forward. And so that's what we're going to work on here today. I think what I'd like to do first is ask Amy Sheldon to just sort of list off for us the accomplishments in the climate realm that have come as a result of the work of your committee. So, you know, you've got a couple of different places where climate related things have moved through your committee. So take it away.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us. And I love the idea of a moment of celebration at crossover. So from your House Natural Resources Committee this year, the main way that we interact with, obviously, climate is land use, right? That's our area of jurisdiction. And so we have moved, the first bill that we moved that you all supported was the use value, changes to use value to allow for old forests on certain parcels. So it's very exciting to have that opportunity. We spent a lot of time exploring the value of old forests, and they are extraordinarily valuable in sequestering carbon and also supporting biodiversity. So thanks for your support on that. And next I would go to changes to the Act 50 board, which are coming up Tuesday of next week. They're on the calendar coming up tomorrow. We're going to ask to move it to Tuesday. And that's obviously just supporting reinvigorating our support for our statewide land use goals through shoring up governance at the Natural Resources Board. And then yesterday we brought perhaps one of the strongest so far, I think it is one of the strongest 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 conserved land in the state of Vermont goals. And relatedly, the plan is very important because we are perhaps unique among the states. I don't know another state that has such a great guide, Vermont Conservation Design, that we linked our goal to is huge because one of the things that we've become aware of in the land conservation realm is that we've been better at conserving land, but we're not necessarily keeping track of where that land is and making sure it's the highest priority given whatever the goal for that is. Obviously there's different goals for different types of conservation, but in terms of old forests and biodiversity and then therefore better results for the climate, where we do it and how we do it matters, and that bill starts to get to that. So it's big. That's a big victory for the House. Those are the three I can think of. There's other members of my committee here that I missed. Anything that you think of as climate related?
H466 was a water availability bill, and that is to establish a water withdrawal permitting program, which is critically important for us to ensure that we have enough water in the system, in our surface waters, particularly during extensive drought that we occasionally see during the growing season. This bill ensures that there's enough water to meet our uses now.
What was that bill number again?
H466.
466. Great.
That's over in the Senate.
Excellent. So committee, any questions from folks about natural resources wins? And thank you for your great work on that. And we hope that we can pull these remaining bills across the floor and get them over to the Senate. Mike?
Yeah, doesn't the land trust keep track of conserved land?
Yeah, so the baseline of understanding how much conserved land there is pretty available, but yes, of course, they keep track of their land. The state used to have a database. It's in varying degrees of being, current. It's kind of what we learned, and this will hopefully bring those existing data points together. As I said on the floor, the conservation groups who are working more on biodiversity related conservation work estimate 22 to 24% of lands are already in natural state conserved, but it's an estimate. And then we asked them to be really specific about the different types of conservation categories, because conservation, and part of why we had that word change on the floor yesterday in the amendment was that we had taken testimony toward the end to change the titles of the conserved types of land to line up better with conservation design. But yes, I don't know that it's going to be a huge lift for the agency to do this. It's just looking at it in a slightly different lens and understanding where we are in the conservation goals.
And then I have one more bill, H 523, which we had Representative Morris present. And that was to address, to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the release of what we call HFCs, which are hydrofluorocarbons.
And noting that bill and 606 with the 30 by 30 goals were in the climate action plan.
Or what?
In the climate action plan.
Check, check. Love it. All right, so energy and technology, in addition to having the fabulous clean heat standard coming through the floor, also has a bill related to municipal buildings. And so Kathleen Sims, what can you tell us about?
Yeah, our committee's doing awesome work this year, which are both coming out of recommendations from the climate action plan. So 518 is the municipal fuel switching grant program. So that's been expanded a bit beyond fuel switching. So I think we all know our municipalities own a lot of very old buildings that are not incredibly energy efficient. So costing taxpayers money and having a large carbon footprint. And this bill seeks to address that in three ways. So help reduce emissions in our municipal buildings, support community resiliency as we help sort of adapt these municipal buildings to be multi-purpose, and strengthen creating technical assistance between municipalities, our regional planning commissions, buildings, grounds, general services, and Efficiency Vermont. So the bill expands an existing state program, the State Municipal Energy Management Program, which helps plan and finance weatherization in state buildings and expands that to municipal buildings. The bill has technical assistance at the state and regional level and small grants for supporting community conversations. It provides grants for assessments, which will allow towns to assess multiple buildings and recommend improvements to reduce fossil fuel use and reduce emissions, like planning for battery storage and solar siting and weatherization. And then the majority of the funding is for grants and loan funds to weatherize and reduce fossil fuel usage. So to act on the recommendations from the assessments. And so in the end, hopefully we'll have better, tighter, more energy efficient municipal buildings that save taxpayers dollars and reduce emissions. And there have been many partners helping craft this bill, like the LCT, Efficiency Vermont, and our regional planning commissions. The funding is 48. Did I miss something? Yeah, other members of the committee check. Yeah.
I was just going to, in terms of the kinds of things that are covered, I just also wanted to stress that in addition of weatherization and other measures, it does include system conversions where that's necessary.
So wood pellets, heat pumps, all of that stuff. Total funding is 48.4 million of capital ARPA dollars. 40 million would go to grants to municipalities to make those improvements. 5 million to BGS for a contractor to conduct the assessments for multiple buildings and municipalities. 2.4 to the regional planning commissions to provide the technical assistance and support to municipalities, and 1 million for municipalities to conduct community meetings and resiliency. There are 2 amendments, one from House Appropriations and one from Ways and Means, that add some clarification to some of the language, increase the grant amounts, and one final one that I'm forgetting. So I'll look at my notes here. Removing BGS's ability to assess fees and instead asking them to come back with a recommendation for the amount. It was voted out of our committee 9-0 and will be on the floor today.
That's amazing. That's so exciting. I think that that's one of those, maybe not glamorous and not, not flashy, but really good, really good support for our communities and empowering our communities to do a better job of using our resources, save taxpayer dollars going forward.
Just one thing I like about it, in addition to the actual work, is because they're community buildings that most people in town know. It's educational for people in town. They find out that they're, whatever the town hall, the town clerk's office, whatever it is having such and such done to it. That is, people learn from that. People learn how much benefit there can be from that.
Excellent.
While 40 million is a lot, it probably won't be able to solve every problem in every building. Our municipalities own an estimated 2,000 old buildings that our towns maintain. But hopefully the assessment, produces a whole series of recommendations that maybe it can't be funded with this resource, like can, find other resources to help move those projects forward.
Very cool. Other questions on municipal fuel switching? Is that what you call the bill coming out of your?
Well, so that's the
We've been
title.
struggling
I think
with what to
we're
call it.
changing it. I think it's like Mary now, the Municipal Energy Resilience Initiative. Mary is what we're launching.
I love that.
But it's great. Thanks to stakeholder feedback. I think the bill was originally focused just on making those fuel switching things. Thanks to feedback from stakeholders, we've really broadened it to include, weatherization and other initiatives that just help, reduce fossil fuels and emissions beyond just switching out your oil boiler for a wood pellet stove. So Mary, I believe, is what it will be called.
Sounds good. Any questions for the folks from Energy and Technology?
So I'm curious about the assessments,
Yeah.
who actually do that work and sort of what the scope of it is and over what period of time.
Yeah, so BGS will receive the funding to hire a contractor to do the assessments. Municipality can apply and can look at a couple of different buildings. Not just the town hall, but maybe also the library and the Grange. And they will be, I think, comprehensive sort of community resiliency assessments, making recommendations to help reduce fossil fuel emissions.
So the focus is more than just on municipal buildings. It's more of a community-wide assessment, or is that,
No.
how will that be?
You can look at multiple buildings.
Yeah.
And then you can only get a grant for one building.
One building.
Yeah.
But can sort of think more broadly about buildings within the community for the assessments.
But they are municipal buildings, not like every.
Yeah, you'd like not my home or a nonprofit, but so often towns run their libraries, so that's why the library was.
And the assessment is not at the same deep level as an energy audit. It's a kind of, because you may be looking at multiple buildings, it's a walkthrough of by some knowledgeable people that can sort of sketch out what it looks like needs to be done here. Once you choose what you're going to do, you may need, part of that work may be a design and and more of an audit.
Excellent. So we look forward to a strong vote on the floor for that this afternoon.
What was the vote on the committee?
9-0.
Excellent. All right, so we have, I think, 3 members of the Transportation Committee with us today. We haven't checked in with you all since you have made your final decisions, and I know that the T-bill is over in appropriations, so we also have some of our advocate friends here to help us. Since all of us have been so busy in our committees, we haven't been able to pay as close attention to what's going on over in appropriations. So let's talk transportation policy, and then we'll talk budget.
All right, I'll go. So we have had a time of it wrangling things and trying to figure out initially, we tried to get as much from H 552, which probably most of you signed on to, into the T-bill. What we found out is that as we're putting things in, we found out that not everything would be ARPA eligible. It's unclear what's ARPA eligible. There's just a lot of sort of confusion about that, but we presented our wish list to House Appropriations today, and it includes some really great things in terms of electric vehicle. Who's doing the deployment, electric vehicle deployment parts of it? Are you doing it? No.
You're talking about infrastructure?
Infrastructure, yeah. A lot of money for charging station, EVSE deployment. And some of it going to certain categories, like of this $10 million, certain percentage going to multi-unit houses, some of it multi-unit buildings, some of it going to workplaces, some of it going to just to different, I can't remember all the different categories, but anyway, it's sort of dividing it up to make sure that it doesn't just go to one place. And then we have some money also going, because there's a category for ARPA for recreation and tourism. So we've got $3 million going to fishing access, state parks and fishing access areas going there through the Agency of Natural Resources, and for level 1, level 2 charging. And then some other money going to, so that's, and then a lot of 6.25 million going to level 3 charging. So there's trying to cover the level 1, level 2, level 3, trying to get it deployed around the state. We're going to also have a map of where those charging stations are. We can get more specific about that, about how far apart they can be and all that. But then we have electric vehicle.
Add a couple things to that.
Yeah, sure, please.
Basically, it's what the governor recommended in terms of funding, although exactly where the money's coming from isn't clear, but we did put the parameters in that Molly mentioned about where we want the stuff to go. We did, but it's only about 70% of the money, so it leaves 30% discretionary for the administration. But one thing we did do is move the timeline up, because the governor wanted, I forget how far out.
Yeah.
We want these things, the infrastructure is an incentive. If you release or get rid of the range anxiety, it's so critical. So we put in language to suggest that we want this money spent as quickly as possible, not to drag it out over 3 or 4 years.
And that's the same thing with the electric vehicle incentives. We have 12 million for the new, it's called the new PEV program, which is the program that's been in tech for a couple of years. There's actually, I just looked today, there's like $900,000 left in this budget year. We're putting 12 million in. The thought about the administration was that it was going to be spread out over 4 years, and we have language to say, and we need this investment every year to reach our goals of how many electric vehicles we need according to the climate action plan. So there's language in there that sort of says, if there's money left over, it can be carried forward, but the goal is to get it spent now. So there's 12 million in there. There's 3 million for Mileage Smart. You remember that program, which is a program run through Capstone Agency to help low-income people get fuel-efficient EV or hybrid or fuel-efficient cars. And that program has been very successful, run by Sue Minter and Paul Zabriskie. And then there's 3 million for Replace Your Ride, which is the program that we funded last year, but never got off the ground. But now there's because it just never, it needed an administrator. And now the administrator is going to be, what's the name of the organization that's administering all the programs that they're going to be administering the electric vehicle program of Center for Sustainable Energy.
Oh, that contractor?
Right, I think they're doing it. And also in all these programs, up to 15% can be used for administration because that's a really critical point of it, is outreach, education, and also money going to Drought Electric Vermont. And then, does anybody else want to talk? We've got Fair Free, we've got the MTI grants. Do you wanna-
Yeah, let's just hit the highlights
Yeah,
so that
those
we.
are the highlights. So the electric vehicle, the deployment of the charging network, the electric vehicle incentives for low and moderate income people, new or used vehicles. We're putting price up to $45,000 cars. We had a $40,000 cap on cars that would be eligible for incentives, but now it seems that, that most of the vehicles, a lot of the vehicles would be desirable are more at a higher price. We put up to 45,000. Whether it should be 50 or 45, but we put it at 45. And then we've continued fare free transit. The governor's recommend was just for rural transit, and we talked to Green Mountain Transit and runs the system in Burlington, and they said that they didn't put it in their budget, but they would welcome if we put money in the budget. So then we had a little bit, we were going to put another 1.6 in, but then it turned out that we sort of made a compromise. The only service that will not be fare free is the Link Express, which is a commuter route. And those riders are, some businesses will help their employees pay for that. It's also choice ridership, so probably people who would have a vehicle would not necessarily be in the list. So we made that, that's the only exception to fare free. And then in addition, there are these mobility and transportation innovation grants that have gone to fund a variety of different, like mostly this sort of rural over. Does anybody know about the My Ride service in Montpelier? You can get the app and ride it around. And they funded that and is funding 12 feasibility studies in different towns. And so there was a 500,000 in there. We put another 500,000 into that. We rated the maintenance budget of V-Trans, which is a no-no. But we rated it to some extent. They didn't like that, but because that's all state dollars. Are there any other like real highlights? What else have I forgotten?
Bike infrastructure.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I was gonna mention whenever there was a little in there, but we're feeling like we fell short, some of us on the committees, but we have the DMV bill and we're gonna be pushing for some bicycle and pedestrian safety stuff, in that, which is Senate bill we haven't started on. I don't know, Kurt is the champion.
And there's also $1 million for electric bicycle incentives. Yeah.
I am wondering, so I heard great things about microtransit in Montpelier. What is in this bill to expand that out to other communities? My community is very interested in bringing microtransit.
In
this, is there budgeted money to expand that to other
that's
communities?
what these MTI grants are for.
Okay,
So there are now 12 feasibility studies happening, and so your community could apply.
excellent. Molly, do you mind?
Sorry, for the feasibility study. They're not gonna, it doesn't necessarily fund the service.
Okay,
It funds the feasibility study. We found out that in Montpelier it was costing them what, 250,000 more or something like that. But that had to do with software that
Mhm.
had to be developed. And so in addition, like in Montpelier, instead of 3 fixed routes, now these same 3 buses are just going on call here and there. And what they found is that one of the routes up to the hospital is sort of like people are using it like the old route. So they're thinking that maybe a hybrid approach, this is a new thing. People are trying to figure it out. I think it's a great solution to rural transit, especially in, smaller towns. So we just have to see, but these grants will help us get there.
thank you.
I thank you for also in the future paying attention to the public safety. Because as we encourage more housing in downtown areas, more crosswalks, more sidewalks, pedestrian friendly, bike friendly development, we also need to make sure that the public safety elements are contained either in this bill or in what's coming over from the Senate.
What was the language that we had in there for about a report about? Oh, well, I think they're trying to think about how to integrate pedestrian bicycle planning between towns.
there's some language in there, and I think we're gonna put something else in that.
I get that.
There's land is more available.
Chris?
Just on the charging, two questions. The rental housing or the multi-unit things, are those grants for landlords or are those public stations that would be installed there?
I think it's grant, right? Maybe, I can't remember now.
So there was also $1 million in last year's T-bill on this, and the language, I believe this year is silent on that question, but last year, the language directed ACCD to essentially pilot both concepts, having some EVSE in dedicated parking in the parking lot, for instance, at a multi-unit dwelling that's not available to public, and also adjacent public parking to try to figure out what best serves these this community. So I would assume it would be something similar with this funding.
The whole EVSE landscape is like unclear. How are they gonna charge, who's gonna pay, et cetera. It's all being worked out. But
And then you mentioned charging stations more broadly, and are level 3 the fast ones?
Yeah.
So why are we investing in level 1 at this point? If it's pretty slow, right?
Yeah.
That's a very good point.
yes.
That's a level 1
What's
charger,
the
right?
answer?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a 120, so it's an outlet.
So in 3 days, you can move your car again.
So what's the very good answer?
Senate will fix it.
Well, we gotta have something. to
I
do,
think I
right?
heard that in stereo.
You know, person really is entering the bill was in state parks, and we could have places that don't have a convenience outlet.
Yeah.
And so.
Better than nothing.
Yeah.
Barely. Okay.
So I see a couple of hands up, but I also just want to make a time check here because we have Rebecca Ramos and Ben Walsh here to talk about sort of all of the things that are happening in the appropriations realm. And then we need to have a Senate side update as well. So quick questions. I can wait. Quick question.
Just to reiterate that rural Vermont also needs these public transport. We have a mad bus line. Every year they threaten to cut the funding, and yet it provides important free services for public transport. And I just want to emphasize how important these programs for rural Vermont.
Absolutely. All right, budget update.
Hello, I know most of you. My name is Rebecca Ramos. For the folks I don't know, welcome. Good to see you. So I am a lobbyist, but an advocate with the climate groups. We've been working with you all for 6 or 7 years now. I often like to start a conversation with a level set. So let's just talk about past, present, future. If you guys remember, we couldn't even say the word climate 6 years ago. And now we're talking about spending hundreds of millions of dollars on climate crisis. And so a lot of that has to do with the good work of this group organizing and working with your peers. So I want to thank you all for that. And just remember that this moment is really unique. We may never have this moment again. So we at the Crossing Group follow all the appropriations. We have been in House appropriations this entire session, and what it started out as a very happy place with like lots of money over the last 3 or 4 weeks have turned into a very sad place with lots of hearts broken for many different reasons, including restrictive use of ARPA, revenues being down, certain federal bills not moving. And so your House approach is definitely struggling. They're cutting more than they thought they would. And we know there are going to be many around this table unhappy because their budget memos will not be what you expected them to be. That said, this group is very fortunate because Chair Hooper is a climate advocate almost first and foremost. And I know our climate group, which is like Hooper, Finn over there, VNRC, PDSR, and others, we work very closely with her and have been working very closely with her about key investments. And I know that y'all hear this in House Energy, but key investments that are going to support our requirements of the GWSA and our energy plans. And so everything that we talk about is database and focused on our greenhouse gas emissions and resilience, et cetera. So that's just to sort of set the stage, if it's helpful to know, dynamics that are at play. Ben is going to just talk briefly about what has happened so far. There are some climate pieces that have been agreed to in the budget, some have not. That includes the transportation. Some of it's been agreed to. There's still things up in the air. But I do want to add, and you've heard some of this already, the budget is not the only place that dollars are moving, which I'm sure Senator Pearson, you're going to talk about the EJ bill, which has dollars in it in the Senate. But there's 703, which is your workforce bill. It hasn't been decided on yet in House of Pros, but it has dollars in there around climate workforce. Your Muni bill, which has been talked about, and some of your money around housing and downtown, designated downtown housing. So let me just turn it over. On your weatherization bill in the Senate. So let me just turn it over to Ben to get into the key major details of where House Approach is right now.
Thank you, Rebecca. So Ben Julie Walsh with the Vermont Public Interest Research Group. So recognizing the time, I'll go through this relatively quickly. Obviously, I or members of the sort of relevant committees can provide more details on any of this, but in addition to the 48 million that Representative Sims mentioned in 518 for municipal energy resilience, which has already passed out of appropriations, in the budget proper, on Wednesday morning, they preliminarily approved a number of climate-related investments. Obviously, we're not, it's not over until it's sorted out of committee, but that included 45 million for the low-income weatherization program, run by the community action agencies, 35 million for moderate income weatherization, run through Efficiency Vermont, 20 million for electrical upgrades for the homes of low and moderate income Vermonters to support energy transition technologies like EV charging or full climate heat pumps that need, in some cases, wiring upgrades, panel upgrades, that sort of thing. They also added, in addition to the 20 million that the governor proposed for that, 5 million to install heat pump water heaters in low and moderate income homes, in particular focusing on homes that have fossil heat systems, fossil water heaters that are near the end of their useful life. That was a program called Switch and Save that was sort of conceptualized at the Energy Action Network. We're really excited to see that included in there. Again, preliminary list, 2 million for load management and storage. Again, mostly for low and moderate income Vermonters. The whole host of vehicle and EVSE incentives that Representative Burke went through. And then I'll also mention just very briefly, in addition to workforce, H703, the workforce bill, which has some really important climate components there. I don't believe have gotten to yet, but I know House Natural supported $150,000 for a life cycle assessment of Vermont's greenhouse gas emissions. That was a recommendation of the Climate Council, and we're certainly hoping that it's funded. So as Rebecca mentioned, really the sort of open question on the climate pieces right now is the transportation pieces that are either ARPA or general fund or one-time dollars. They were talking about that this morning, and obviously we'll be deciding on those in the next day or so. We're hopeful that they will be fully funded, recognizing the context that those decisions are being made with them.
I would just want to add the conversation, the spending of the 45 and 35 million almost went with no conversation in the House of Probes, and they were following the House Energy Technology memo pretty closely. And just from a future state, I think this may be the best it gets. I think it's going to be harder in the Senate to keep these dollars and for what it's worth.
Well, Andy will help us.
All right. Since we're a little short on time, can we switch gears and
Yeah,
celebrate some victories that have come?
yeah, there's two significant pieces moving in the Senate, environmental justice that's out of committee and into approps, and I haven't heard any reason to be concerned, although the Senate always collects all of the budget dynamics. So in this case, there's more constricted dynamics. But I don't know if folks have been watching Senate approach more closely. We also did see S284 move, that is the weatherization bill, moved just before crossover. Not earth shattering because most of it's the money, which is traveling in the House bill, although this also calls for the money, but it updates our target to 120,000 homes and then makes a few strategic pushes in terms of investing in workforce. So it's grants to VTC. It's you know, some of those like, hey, we realize that workforce is not trivial right now, and here are some, you know, sort of $500,000 grants kind of thing to partners around the state to figure it out. So I think it's in addition to being valuable, of course, we're going to really be watching the money, but as I understand it, the pairing of a clean heat standard and a weatherization, making progress in weatherization is important politically for a whole lot of reasons, from sort of leftist activists to the governor, actually. So I was pleased to see that just meet crossover deadline, no small lift. So anyway, those are the major things that have been shifting, moving, advancing in the House. I mean, in the Senate.
Excellent. That sounds like a really good
Yeah, not bad for a bunch of
stopping point.
ruffians.
Not bad for, you know, figuring out how to come back to working in person here together. And, you know, we've got a lot of work to do to, as Rebecca pointed out, to hold on to the investments that that we're fighting to win in the House bill. And so the second half of the session is going to be us really wanting to double down and make sure that we hold and get these bills across the line. So great. Good work. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bob.
Second, let me just, pulling the Zoom, look at it.
How are you?
Bright and breathing.
Now.
So that's all we could ask for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joe.